was looking for a birthday gift for my niece. She was turning 12, and at that age where I really didn't know what would be an appropriate gift for her. My sister said she loved dolls. She had a huge doll collection, and that if I got her a doll, it was likely to be a big hit. Apparently, my niece had been collecting dolls since she was 3 years old. I asked what type of doll she would like. My sister mentioned that she particularly liked the dolls with the porcelain faces, those that looked like an antique. Since these weren't made anymore, I knew I was going to have to look at either an antique shop or online. I decided to look on Craigslist. Many of my friends had good luck with Craigslist. It took me a while, but I finally found a potential prospect. I contacted the seller to get more information. It was a husband and wife who lived on a farm. They were older, probably in their 70s. The woman's name was Ruth, and she seemed very nice. She said her husband's name was Mike. My sister had told me that my niece really liked the dolls with the blue eyes and the bows in their hair. I asked Ruth about the dolls' characteristics, and they seemed to appear close to what I was looking for. The ad had a picture, but it wasn't very clear. Ruth and Mike lived on a farm about 2 hours away, so I wanted to make sure it was worth my time before I went out there. After getting a few more details from Ruth, I decided I'd like to see the doll. Ruth gave me directions out to the farm, and we agreed to meet at noon the next day. That morning, I got onto the road early. I was really excited to see the doll. I brought cash as requested by Ruth. She had told me that she and Mike were not technical people and that they had no way to take an electronic payment. The drive was going to be over 2 hours, but the weather was good. The roads were clear, given I was traveling on a Sunday. It was a pretty drive. I was really hoping that I would like the doll. It had been a few years since I had been able to celebrate with my niece on her birthday. I have to travel a lot for work, so I'm often gone. So I was really looking forward to celebrating with her and getting a gift that she would love. As I drove, I watched as my cell phone reception dropped significantly. It went from 5 bars to only 1 bar, and that was before I even turned off the main road. Ruth had warned me about this and said that she and Mike only had a landline. Finally, I came to the last exit. Ruth told me they were a good 10 miles off the highway. She said it had seemed like I was going forever, but to just keep driving, and eventually I'd see a sunflower field. She said, when you see the field, you'll know you're close. I was told to look for a big white farmhouse with a bright red door. And in her grandmotherly way, I could hear her voice saying, "I'll be looking out for you." I slowly pulled up to the house. It was just as Ruth described. It was then that the reality hit me. I was getting a strange feeling, and the hair began to slightly stand up on the back of my neck. I said to myself, well, here you are, a single female, in the middle of nowhere, with very little cell phone reception, about to meet strangers and go into their house alone. It didn't seem like a very good plan. I sat for a moment, deciding what to do. Ultimately, I decided to go in. I had come all this way and really wanted to see this doll. I felt that there was a pressure on me. My sister had talked about how difficult it was to find this kind of doll, how they had looked for the past 3 years unsuccessfully. So I really wanted to come through, have this be a success, and bring the doll home for my niece's birthday gift. As I walked up the steps, Ruth greeted me before I could even knock on the door. She introduced herself and gave me a big hug. She called me sweetie and motioned for me to come inside. Once inside, we stood at the base of the stairs. Ruth offered me some coffee or tea, but I politely declined. I think she could sense my hesitation. And then she said that before we went upstairs, she wanted to tell me a few more things about the doll. The doll had been in her family for over 100 years, and that it had belonged to her grandmother. She said that no one knew how her grandmother received the doll, but that she was told it was a gift. Then she said uncomfortably that it never felt like a gift. Ruth also said that the animals wouldn't go near it, especially the dog and cat. I asked what the dog and cat did when they were around the doll. Ruth said the dog would whine, and usually the cat would hiss at it. Ruth mentioned the doll definitely has a strong presence. Then she laughed uncomfortably and said, "You know, sometimes I can swear the doll is moved from the last place that I put her. It's strange. I can't explain it, but you know, I think it's all in my head. Or at least that's what Mike says." We started up the stairs, and the floors creaked beneath our feet, just like you'd expect in an old farmhouse. When we got to the top of the stairs, Ruth grabbed my arm gently and said, "She stays in this room." I was nervous. Something about the house, the bedroom door. There was a certain energy in the air. Ruth motioned towards the door. I hesitated. Every hair on the back of my neck was standing straight on end. I stalled and asked Ruth again for some more of the information about her family, the history, and the doll. We talked for several more minutes. Ruth reminisced about her grandmother. She had so much pride that Ruth had chosen her to inherit the doll. Then the cat came up to my leg and rubbed against it. I knelt down to pet her. She had a very soft head. Ruth said to the kitty, "Do you want to come in the room with us?" As we made our way to the door, the cat leaped down the stairs. Ruth said, "I've put her on the bed for you. She seems to like it there. I told her you were coming. You know, I think she heard me." Ruth slowly opened the door. We stepped inside. I was immediately affected. It was like a strange force had hit me in the chest when I saw the doll. I hesitated, turned to Ruth and said, "Wow, that's quite a presence. I see what you mean." I approached the bed, but it was very strange. I had only gotten a brief glimpse of the doll before I turned to talk with Ruth, but in that short time I could have sworn the doll was initially further back on the bed. We stood talking about the doll. I looked over again. This time it felt like she was even closer to the end of the bed. I think Ruth noticed it as well, but she kept an uncomfortable grin on her face. I was completely freaking out and trying to hold it together. Ruth said, "Would you like to hold her?" I mentioned, I don't really think she's the right doll for me. My niece is looking for certain characteristics, and there's a couple that she just doesn't have. I told Ruth I really appreciated her showing me the doll and quickly started for the bedroom door. As I headed for the staircase, Ruth again asked if I would like some coffee or tea. I told her I had to get going quickly, that I had a long drive back. She said she understood and was sorry I had come all this way for nothing. As I headed down the porch steps, I heard a very unsettling sound. It was like a scream from a distressed animal. I stopped abruptly. It was coming from the barn. Ruth said, "Oh, don't worry about that, honey. Mike is doing some work in the barn. That's how we make our living." I was horrified. I quickly thanked Ruth, gave her a hug, and started for my car. As I began to drive away, I saw the side barn door open, and for a split second, I could have sworn that I saw the doll. My heart was racing. I began to drive away from the farm, this time much faster than when I approached. Once I got past the sunflower field, I started to relax a little. But then, I got a feeling that I wasn't alone. I peered into my rear-view mirror. It was the doll! I quickly stopped the car and jumped out. I looked in the back seat, and it was empty. I frantically looked in the front seat, and it was empty too. I then went back around to the trunk, and nothing was there. I rechecked the car, frantic. I found nothing. I was sweating. My heart was pounding. I stood there looking into the car and wondering what was going on. After several minutes, I got back into the car and slowly began to drive away. This was the most freaky experience I had ever had. Nothing like this had ever occurred in my life before. When I got back to the main road, I called my sister and told her what happened. She said I just needed to relax, that I was under a lot of stress. All of this was true. I began to recount the steps of the day, the experience at the house. I should have listened to my instincts. Everything had been telling me that I should have not gone there, that I shouldn't have entered the house alone. Had I listened to my instincts, none of this would have happened. The history of the doll, the reaction of the dog and the cat, Ruth's body language, the house, the room, the doll, all of it. Everything said, stay away. The barn, the movement of the doll on the bed, I was sure of it. It was time to just face reality. Something very strange had happened out there. I settled into my drive. We would look at another doll another day.